Hello everyone, Lore Master of Sotek here, and there is so much stuff to talk about, isn't there? Frankly, I've almost been overwhelmed. I actually would say I have been overwhelmed by just the sheer amount of information that has come out regarding Total War Warhammer alone, and that's not even talking about a massive amount of things that have been going on for Age of Sigmar and Vermintide, and it's been a lot the last few days, which is a good thing, but for me personally can also be a bad thing, because it's hard and daunting to keep up with it all. But let's get into things. So for this video, I actually want to go ahead and talk about Khorne. The Total War Warhammer 3 Khorne faction has finally had their big trailer released, where we at long last had Big Daddy Skarbrand confirmed as the one legendary lord that Khorne will have going into Total War Warhammer 3's base release. This is, of course, extremely exciting news. Skarbrand, at least for me personally, was my most desired pick. I had some fears, honestly, that they might lose their minds and try to go with like Kabanda, but thankfully they've stuck with the OG, and we've got him coming in hard to lead us into battle and get indiscriminate slaughter in the name of the Blood God, and I am very, very excited. His model looks absolutely gorgeous. For those who are not aware of who Skarbrand is, as a little education, Skarbrand is known as the Exiled One. He essentially was, once upon a time, the greatest general and champion of Khorne, the Blood God and the God of Slaughter, and the strongest, most of the time, of the Chaos Pantheon. Skarbrand was his biggest, baddest man, and led many victorious battles within the Great Game, particularly within the realm of Chaos itself. He became beyond infamous for curb stomping the champions of the other Dark Gods and leading the legions of Khorne to many victories, to the point where he was Khorne's most favored son and had a lot of things going for him. He was swollen with power, thanks to the favor of his patron, or his father. However, he became so strong and so powerful that instead of just being a figure of rage and wrath, he started to get a little bit of pride mixed in there too. And while Skarbrand kept growing in the eyes of Khorne, he eventually reached the point where there was really nowhere else for him to go except maybe to take Khorne's place. And that's when Tzeentch entered the game. When the god of change, the god of lies and trickery and deception, started to whisper in Skarbrand's ear, and Tzeentch, the god, actually put a lot of attention on Skarbrand to try and rob his rival Khorne of his greatest pawn, his greatest piece in the great game. So Tzeentch managed to kind of play on Skarbrand's ego and his desire for even greater slaughter and bloodshed, to the point that when Skarbrand was finally essentially with Khorne, likely discussing some conquest or simply attending his master, Khorne turned his back to Skarbrand to deal with something, and it was at that moment that Tzeentch's deceptions and whispered words finally pushed Skarbrand over the edge. It finally pushed him too far, and Skarbrand leapt forward, raising his twin axes. I believe they're called Carnage and Slaughter, I think is the name of the other one, but he brings his axes down as hard as he can with his near omnipotent might, and just slams everything he has into Khorne's back, which unfortunately for him did not hurt the God of Rage, because Khorne is a god, and Skarbrand is merely a large piece, but still a fragment of his god's power. However, he did manage to dent and scratch Khorne's armor, which, when you're dealing with a godly individual, denting their armor is a pretty horrific accomplishment as far as raw power goes. This, however, was seen by Khorne as an exceedingly cowardly act. Not only was it betrayal, but Skarbrand struck at him with his back turned, instead of challenging him to open combat or facing him in a more honorable situation. Not that Khorne really cares that much about honor when the chips are down, but this betrayal you know, when you're dealing with a god who is literally the embodiment of rage, that is his primary emotion that fuels and created him, backstabbing him probably isn't going to end well, and it didn't. Khorne turned around and he grabbed Skarbrand, and as punishment for this betrayal, he basically crushed all of the sentience out of Skarbrand. He basically just squeezed him and beat out of him everything except for his rage. So all that was left in Skarbrand was to be a figure of pure and utter rage, anger, hatred. He is no longer a clever, sentient, thinking bloodthirster. He is more like an embodiment, an elemental of fury. He doesn't have the ability to really think anymore. He doesn't have the ability to plan or scheme. He merely exists to fight and to be enraged and angry, and that's all he's capable of. That's honestly why throughout the lore he's such an undependable ally. He's actually one of the most duplicitous of demons, not actively, because he's not trying to betray you. It's just that because he's wrath and rage embodied, he never stops being angry. He never stops trying to fight. He never stops trying to kill. And he is so much this embodiment, this icon of rage and hatred, that even just being around him causes others to become filled with rage and hatred, and so they start attacking each other. So not only does his mere presence embolden and empower the demons of Khorne, it can cause all of Skarbrand's enemies to start infighting and start ripping each other apart in the most brutal fashions possible, as they're just utterly consumed unless they just have incredible willpower. But in any event, Khorne, as kind of the final moment of what to do with Skarbrand, after having turned him into basically a brute who is no longer capable of really leading armies in a conventional sense, he reeled back his arm and he chucked Skarbrand as hard as he could out of the realm of chaos. So Skarbrand was launched from the Brass Citadel into the who knows what from the realm of chaos, and eventually he descended into the realms of reality. He basically was a burning comet of just pure fury, and such was the force that he built up when falling from the heavens that he started burning, and that's actually what caused his wings to burn away, is his wings literally were being shredded and torn to pieces by this, just all the flame and power he was enduring as he was re-entering orbit, essentially, and he slams into the ground and just kind of skids along it, which causes half of his face and his horns to get broken and all mangled, and a lot of the flesh on his face literally gets ripped away from just the friction of skidding along the ground, and his form was ruined, so he can no longer fly. He can no longer, enjoy the majesty of soaring through the air like other bloodthirsters. However, in this new form as Skarbrand the Exiled, he has basically just rampaged around the world when possible, unleashing hideous amounts of slaughter and tearing apart anything and everything he can get his hands on. Every once in a while, he pops back up in the mortal... I say the mortal realms, but I don't mean AOS, I mean fantasy. He pops up in reality from time to time and causes a lot of trouble before someone eventually finally will put him down. But Skarbrand is a terrifying individual. He is still Khorne's mightiest demon when it comes to just unleashing pure carnage and pure devastation. However, he is no longer liked by his father, and he exists purely to unleash destruction. You could even go so far as to say Skarbrand hates Khorne. Skarbrand hates his creator, his father, for doing what he did to him, and even tries to rebel against him by striking out at things that maybe Khorne would find valuable, killing other bloodthirsters, killing other legions of Khorne, massacring anything and everything, and even in his exile still trying to get back at Khorne. But Khorne does not care from whence it comes, so long as the blood flows. And Skarbrand, even in his rage, even if he's trying to kill other bloodthirsters or demons, or doing what he can to anger Khorne, all he does is make Khorne stronger, because his hatred of Khorne bolsters Khorne. His rage bolsters Khorne. His slaughter, no matter who he's slaughtering, bolsters Khorne. So even as a exiled animal almost, he still serves his Lord and Master quite well. So I'm really excited to see him coming to the field and leading us as the first revealed demon legendary lord. I think Skarbrand is going to do a kick-ass job. To me, he is the ultimate representation of Khorne, in that he is the purest embodiment of rage. There are, of course, a lot of other Khornate special characters. Hopefully many of them we'll see in the future, but I don't think any character is as perfect a representation of Khorne, like the true nature of the god, as Skarbrand. The other Khornate special characters tend to be much more, either they're not a high enough tier to represent, I think, a legendary lord like Skyla and Frinkum, or they are characters that they're much more specific in like their focus on how they unleash bloodshed and slaughter and rage. You know, where you have Valkia is more like she's the handmaiden of Khorne. She's his Valkyrie. She is more, but she represents more of like the ultimate zenith of bloodshed, to be like the greatest of champions, the greatest, the most skilled and rewarded of slaughterers. And then you've got Skulltaker, who is more kind of like the ultimate duelist, the ultimate champion, and that his whole thing is that he just shows up places and issues challenges to take their skulls. But Skarbrand is just pure unfettered fury. He is ultimate wrath. He is rage incarnate. So I was really rooting for him to get the starting slot, and I'm really, really glad he got it. He looks absolutely fantastic. Once again, just further confirmation showing that they're using the Age of Sigmar redesign of the demons, as opposed to the really ugly old fantasy sculpts. So I'm very, very glad that we're using Skarbrand's newest model, and that gives me high hopes for how the other demon characters will look once we get to see them. However, there are a couple things worth talking about when it comes to Khorne beyond just the Skarbrand reveal. The biggest thing for me personally is that the faction is looking absolutely fantastic. Also, I'm really hoping that's Skarbrand's voice we're hearing in the Enter the World of Khorne trailer, because he sounds absolutely fantastic. The Enter the World of Khorne trailer, though, is fantastic. It shows a lot of really great things. We see a lot of really good mortal units that have been kind of transformed to fit the Demons of Khorne, you know, where we've got the Chaos Hounds, but they've been Khornified. We've got Chaos Spawn, but they've been Khornified. We have Chaos Furies of Khorne, which we already saw when I got to play Total War Warhammer 3 and released some footage on that. But, one last note about Skarbrand, actually, before we get too much further, is that Skarbrand, for those curious and watch the trailer like me, when you get to the end of the trailer, I know I was not alone when I kind of watched Skarbrand take off into the air and went, wait, can Skarbrand fly? And there has been official confirmation. I have spoken with someone who has confirmed that Skarbrand cannot fly. In the trailer, he is merely jumping. So Skarbrand can jump good. He jumped good, for anyone that knows that reference. But, so I imagine he'll probably have some goofy animation where he attempts to fly, or maybe like throws himself in the air and slams back down. Or maybe that was merely just an animation they decided to use for the trailer because it looks cool with him kind of leaping above the rest of the army. But he will not be flying in Total War Warhammer 3. They have stuck to his lore and his rules from tabletop, so do not worry. He has not been altered in that sense. Something that I actually do want to talk about is that, honestly, I have to say, the rosters for these races, the god races, are stacked. I mean, these are really thick boy rosters that are very large, and I'm frankly kind of shocked how big they are. You know, I was expecting a good mix of mortals and demons, because in my opinion, you cannot get away with merely having a demon roster when you're going to go mono god. So I felt very confident, okay, we're going to be getting some like chaos warriors to mix things up, and they did do that. But the sheer amount of variants that are popping up and the sheer amount of units that have been Khornified, I even had a moment where I thought, oh, okay, maybe they're not going to put all the demons in, because when I was watching the Enter the World of Khorne trailer, I very studiously noticed that there were no Fleshhounds. And I was like, okay, you know, Fleshhounds, I absolutely love Fleshhounds, but I could definitely see them, you know, being a DLC unit. You know, you kind of have your Chaos Warhounds that fulfill a similar role, though Fleshhounds are much, much larger. They're more akin to horse-sized as opposed to dog-sized. But, you know, I could see that. And then, literally yesterday, they released the unit spotlight trailer on Fleshhounds of Khorne. So, you know, the Fleshhounds look amazing, and I'm super duper excited they're in the game right away. But, honestly, I've been kind of sitting here just looking at the army and thinking to myself, okay, so what is not going to be in the roster? Because frankly, I'm running out of things to not see popping up in the Chaos roster. Especially at least for Khorne. Like, we've seen literally every demon. The only demon I can think of off the top of my head that is not showing up is the, oh gosh, what did they call those goofy things? The Soul Grinder, that's what it's called. The Soul Grinder is the only thing I haven't seen, which is a demon of chaos, show up. But like I said, the Soul Grinder is kind of a weird critter. And honestly, once you make one Soul Grinder, you've essentially made all of them. So where I'm getting at with this is I'm really curious how DLCs for Khorne are going to work going into Game 3. Because the only thing missing from the rosters are really creatures that could pop up in other rosters, or creatures that are, you know, part of like an undivided force. But it really seems like they are not leaving any holes in this roster other than just, you know, special characters. I mean, we obviously haven't seen the full Khorne roster yet, so I can't speak to how expanded the generic characters are. You know, I don't know if we're going to be seeing like Demon Prince of Khorne and Bloodthirsters and Chaos Sorcerer Lords and Chaos Lords, you know, all at the get-go. I doubt that. But, you know, same thing for heroes, except for there's even more. But what I'm wondering then is, you know, where do you go from here? You know, are they going to change the way that DLCs work? So are like the gods not going to have Lord packs, for instance? You know, are they not going to show up in those? Because how would you release a Lord pack that's just Khorne versus somebody else? You know what I mean? You know, how could you have like Valkia versus Kislev or somebody, and then give her only Khorne-specific units when those units could also appear in the other factions, seeing as all of the purely Khorne-only units, the Skull Crushers, the Blood Crushers, the Skull Cannons, I would not be surprised at all to see the Blood Throne for Khorne, but the Bloodletters, Exalted Bloodletters, you know, it really seems like all the truly mono Khorne stuff is going to be in the game right at the get-go. So while this does excite me, and I really like that they're going all out on this, and I have zero complaints about that, I'm just very curious about where they're going to go in the future regarding, you know, Khorne or the other Chaos Gods. You know, do you have a DLC where you maybe have a Chaos character versus another Chaos character, and then the units aren't really specific to them, but say like you release, like, here's the Soul Grinder, but every single Chaos God gets him at the same time as part of this DLC. You know what I mean? So I would love to hear thoughts from you guys about maybe what you think's going to happen with this. Maybe we're not going to see traditional Lord packs. You know, maybe one thing I would not mind at all is if they really get a lot of the units and stuff in the game, just get them in there, and then maybe the DLCs could take new forms. So maybe instead of it being one legendary lord, and if we're lucky, a legendary hero, maybe we could get DLCs where it's multiple legendary lords, multiple legendary heroes, and that's it. There are no new units to add. You know, maybe there are regiments of renown, but regiments of renown are not, you know, truly new units. They're essentially reskins that maybe have like a new weapon animation or something, because, you know, sometimes they'll have a different weapon set, but for the most part, you know, they're essentially reskins. So when you're looking at this, I just can't help but look at it and go, I really wonder what the future will be for these kinds of things, because the roster just looks stacked. It looks completely and utterly stacked. And there are some other things to talk about that I can't get into in this video, because I'm going to be talking about it in the next video I put out in regards to, you know, just how stacked the roster is. But in any event, that is going to be it for this particular video. The only other thing that I'm going to add is that, you know what, that'll probably make its own video too. There is a little bit of a secret at the end of the Khorne trailer if you listen very carefully. But I'm going to make my own video regarding that, because this has already gone on longer than I thought. So I hope you all enjoyed this video. Let me know how you're feeling about the Khorne roster down in the comment section below. Are you really excited? Do you like the way everything looks? How do you feel about Skarbrand? Are you really excited and ready for Skarbrand? Do you wish it had been Valkia or Skull Taker instead, or maybe like somebody else? I'd love to know your thoughts down below on all that, and let me know what you think we might be seeing for DLCs going forward, because I just don't think traditional Lord packs are going to work for the mono god factions. But in any event, that's going to be me for today. Or not for today, I'm actually going to release multiple videos today, but that's going to be me for right now. So I'll talk to you guys later. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.